Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and I'm so pleased that you've joined me for today's show. Today, we're exploring the location specifically tenancy guidelines for Florida. And in all of my location specific episodes, I've included as many resources as I can find and included those hyperlinks in the description of the show. So in this case, it's the Florida Residential Landlord Tenant Act, Florida Residential Landlord Tenant Act and supporting documents, as many supporting websites as I can find. Each of my location specific podcasts is set up the exact same way, answering the same four questions. One, what are the basics of the tenancy laws in that area? In this case, Florida. Two, what are some nuances of this location? What's different? What stands out based on some of the other locations that I've studied worldwide? Three, some guidance on abandoned items left behind by a tenant in Florida. And then four, if you need help, where do you even start? Where do you go? So that's basic framework on what we're doing. Now I can tell you, this is not exhaustive. This is not all inclusive. This is not everything. As a landlord in Florida, you need to do your own research. You need to search your city, your regional district, your county seat, whatever it might be. You need to make sure that you are keeping up with what's changing in the legislation there specifically. I probably, even if I had everything perfect right this minute, in 5 minutes after I publish this episode, it could change, and it very will change. It very likely will change. So make sure you're doing your own research. This is not all inclusive. I also need to give a plug for today's sponsor, Aloha Capital Investments, LLC. If you want to know more about real estate investing and what Michael and I are up to, check out alohajb.com. Okay, here we go. If you are watching this on My Life as a Landlord on YouTube, at My Life as a Landlord, that's our YouTube channel, then I'm going to screen share. And here we go. So I'm going to screen share with you some of these are the resources that I'm putting up so that you can see. We're going to go through that. Now, remember that when we're talking about landlord and housing tenancy laws, it actually is a law. And so this is the law part. And so if you click on any of these, it's very legal because guess what? It is. It's legal. So there's usually a guide or some kind of help that will help you sort of translate all of these different things. But like retaliatory conduct. So this talks about how retaliatory conduct in Florida works and how it, what landlord retaliation is defined for. Typically, landlord retaliation includes a timeline where the landlord cannot either increase the rent, try to evict, or decrease the services on an existing tenant for some reason. And yeah, so I don't see the timeline. So if there's not a timeline, then it just means for the end of the tenancy so that the landlord cannot do that. But again, obligations in good faith, you're trying to act in good faith. So that's the first thing. So if you want to read the source document yourself, there it is. And it's up to date. So this is 2024 Florida statutes, including the special session in 2025. All right, let's go to the next one. So this one, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services website. So this is fdacs.gov. Landlord tenant law in Florida. This is typically where you're going to find the majority of your information. We're going to go through some of this, but again, here is Chapter 83, Part 2, Florida statutes. There it is again, Part 2, Florida statutes. So it all goes back to the source document. So this is more tenant minded about before you rent on what to do. This website is, there's quite a bit on here, but you can see there's concealed weapon license, file a complaint, Florida do not call list. So it's not just housing stuff. There's other stuff too, because this is a consumer report, consumer resources website. So this is talking about before you rent. I'm just looking through here, oral and written agreements, written agreement. You want to make sure that you have, it says rental agreements may be either written or oral. Please, if you're listening to this podcast, please do not make an oral handshake lease agreement. It just sets you up for failure in the future. Please make sure everything is written down. If it is not written down, it didn't happen, but they're authorizing that this is okay. I would not recommend this at all. Please make sure. Most rental agreements are written because oral agreements can be subject to misunderstandings, difficult to prove if there's a dispute. Written rental agreement can be a formal contract or simply a copy of a letter stating the rights and obligations of both the landlord and the tenant. Florida law requires that notices to and from a landlord must be in writing and either must be hand delivered or mailed, even if the rental agreement is oral. Again, you want to make sure even if even if it's just a handshake agreement, everything's got to be written down. Yeah. You should always retain any copy of correspondence to and from your landlord. Of course you should. Okay, deposit and rent requirements. This is talking about a damage deposit is the most common requirement for landlords. And they're talking about damaged items. Yeah, before signing a rental agreement, examine the premises. So they're talking about a condition inspection. And they're saying give a copy to the landlord and keep a copy of your files. If possible, take a photo. Why don't you just make it easy and walk through the unit together with the landlord and do a condition inspection together and then sign it. And then you do the same thing at the end. I don't agree with how Florida is taking us on that like this. Like you need to do it better because this will just open this up for he said, she said stuff. That's not good. Okay, on vacating the premises for termination of the lease, if the landlord does not intend to impose a claim on the security deposit, then they must return it to you in full within 15 days. Or if there is going to be a claim, they have to do it within 30 days. Otherwise, they forfeit their right to impose a claim on the deposit and they have to give it back anyway. So you've got to make sure, oh, and you can file a complaint. If you object to the landlord's claim, file a complaint. In fact, let's just open that up and take a look at what it looks like when you file a complaint to institute action in court to adjudicate the landlord's right to a security deposit. There it is. So please select the subject area of your complaint. Let's see, is this? Oh, it says, okay, so let's put in security deposit. Interesting. Please sign in or sign. Oh, security. Oh, it doesn't let me type it in. Okay. Do you wish to file your complaint anonymously? Do you want us to contact the business on your behalf? Oh, okay. So remember, this is consumer services. So they're wondering if there's someone that's going to report. All right, that's not exactly helpful because it won't let you type anything in. Can we actually sign in on this? Looks like you guys got a broken link. Okay, I'll have to email you tomorrow. Weird. Okay. Yeah. All right, responsibilities. It talks about landlord responsibilities, but it depends on the rental unit. This is interesting because it doesn't always happen in the different locations like this. But in Florida, if you have a single family home or a duplex, then you've got to require, yeah, if there's no applicable building housing codes maintaining, basically you have to keep it health and safety. Or as an apartment, now remember, Florida is the location where the condos that had fallen recently, the whole building fell down, a bunch of people died. So remember, this is really important that you do this properly. And so they're taking this really seriously, understandably. Talks about different responsibilities, how we do it. And then, of course, the tenant requirements, and here complying with all building health codes, keeping things nice and tidy, do not destroy, deface, don't be malicious, don't be a boob on this. Access to the premises, you cannot change the locks, you can't lock each other out, landlord can't lock out the tenant can't lock out the landlord. Oh, interesting. So reasonable notice of entry is at least 24 hours prior to entry, and a reasonable time is defined as 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's interesting. I've seen other places elsewhere with different hours, or they don't specify hours at all, but in Florida they do. Interesting. Landlord may also enter under any of the following circumstances with the consent of the tenant when the tenant unreasonably withholds consent, like for no reason, really. In case of an emergency or when the tenant is absent from the premises for a period of time, 1/2 of the time for periodic rental payments. So if you're on a month to month, or if you pay rent monthly, then if they don't hear from you as a tenant for half that 2 weeks, then the landlord can go in, especially to do a health and welfare check. If the rent is current and the tenant notifies the landlord of an tenant absence, then the landlord may enter only with the consent. Yeah, because they're not gone. Okay. The landlord shall not abuse the right of access or use it to harass the tenant. Yeah, it's true. Landlords behave. Failure to meet obligations. If the landlord does not comply, if the tenant does not comply, non-payment of rent. The landlord must serve a tenant with a written notice allowing 3 days, excluding weekends and holidays, for the payment of rent or vacating the premises. This is interesting. So it's 3 business days. If the tenant does not pay the rent or vacate, the landlord may begin a legal action to evict. For the landlord to gain the rent or possession of the dwelling, they must file a suit in court. I've seen this on Facebook groups where this has been taking a long time in Florida, and this can result in a lot of frustrated folks. So if you're a landlord in Florida, I'm really sorry, but it looks like this is going to take a while. The clerk of the county court will then issue a writ of possession to the sheriff, who will notify you that the eviction will take place in 24 hours. If the landlord does not comply, then the tenant may be able to withhold rent, especially if they're not doing safety-based repairs. Aesthetic repairs is one thing, but if it's a safety item, then the landlord needs to do those repairs as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the tenant can do the repair and then deduct it from the rent, withhold rent. Please note that if these events transpire, the landlord can present the tenant with a 3-day notice for payment of rent upon breach or early termination. Oh, this is interesting. If they're going to break a fixed lease and terminate the lease early by the tenant, the landlord's potential remedies may include terminating the rental agreement, taking possession of the rental, and terminating any further liability of the tenant, retaking possession of the dwelling unit, holding the tenant liable for the, so there is an acceleration clause. Meaning if they're 1-year lease, they've signed a 1-year lease and they're breaking it, say 6 months in, the landlord can retake possession of the dwelling unit, but also can hold the tenant liable for the difference between the rent stipulated to be paid under the rental agreement and what the landlord is able to recover from reletting the rental unit. So meaning the difference, they can go after them. That's interesting. Stand by and do nothing, hold the leasee liable for the rent as it comes due. Basically not re-rent the unit. The person is still available. The Florida law does not allow a landlord to force a tenant out by shutting off utilities, changing the locks, removing outside doors, locks, roofs, walls, except for purposes of maintenance, or removing the tenant's personal property from the dwelling unless there is unless action is taken after the surrender, abandonment, or recovery of possession of the rental unit due to death of the last remaining tenant or after lawful eviction. Now remember, a lot of old people go to Florida to live in sunshine. This is probably very common. There's probably a lot of tenant passing away in units in Florida. So this is very interesting. So if any of these occur, the tenant may sue for actual or consequential damages of 3 months rent, whichever is greater, plus court costs and attorney fees. So landlords must behave. When tenants want to give proper notice, then you've got to give proper notice of, let's see, for month to month. Yeah, so you've got to give 1 full calendar month. If you're paying on a monthly basis, you have to give 1 for calendar month notice. Military service. This was really interesting when I was doing research for Florida. Florida law provides that military service member may terminate their rental agreement under certain conditions. However, if you're not going to rent to a military person, you actually have to give them the reason why in writing. Interesting. But yeah, military orders is sort of the out for anything. You cannot charge them for lease, breaking a lease. Like it's just, it is what it is. Let me keep going. Oh, that's that one. I'm just going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so that's exhausted that website. That's the consumer services website. Let's go to the next one. So this one was the Florida Bar. So this is floridabar.org. And this is the group of professional, this is the lawyers in Florida. And so that talks quite a bit. There's a lot in here about consumer pamphlet, right and duties of tenants and landlords. And so there's one, rights and duties of tenants, and then there's another one, rights and duties of landlords. So there is quite a bit in here. I'm not going to read all this because it's not set up. But you do have Florida bar lawyer referral service. If you believe you need legal advice, you need to call an attorney. Here's how you do that. Or you can contact legal aid. And then landlords, it talks all about all of these items in what to do, how to end the tenancy with or without a lease, basic rights, if a tenant permanently moves out. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. So this is Florida Realtors. So this is floridarealtors.org. This is looks like the Florida Realtors Association, and this is must know information about Florida's landlord tenant laws. Now this was updated in December of 2023. So take that as you can, but this is items that as of 18 months ago, because I'm recording this in 2025, that you've got, of course, the federal lead-based paint exposure disclosure. Sorry, that's there. You've got to do this. Security deposits. We talked a little bit about security deposits, but this is Florida Realtor members may download notice of intention to impose a claim on security deposit form. But that's if you're a member of the Florida Realtors. If a resident yeah, so there's this, we talked about this already. Non-payment of rent. So there's a bunch of forms on the Florida Realtor site that if you are a realtor, you are you've hired a realtor to manage your units in Florida, that you've got it. And so, but this is good to educate yourself, even though if you don't use it, you can call someone else. But this, again, learn the game as much as you possibly can from all angles. Let's see, tenant, written of possession, handling of funds, lease forms, short-term leases, condo and homeowners association rights, because there's a lot of condos down there, lease cancellation and termination, notice of non-compliance, mischief, basically. Rental payment. Oh, here, this is a really interesting one. I noticed this one already when we were looking at this. If a residential, so this is a rental payment from an out-of-state bank. So you're in Florida as a landlord. If somebody is trying to, wait a minute, let me make sure I've got this right. Let me just read it. If a residential landlord lives out of state and wants to accept rental payments in an out-of-state bank with a branch in Florida, we recommend the landlord seek legal advice whether this violates Florida law. The law states that advance rent and security deposits must be held in a Florida banking institution, but doesn't specify exactly what that means. So, okay, good question. You might need legal advice for this one, but if you've got, let's say you've got a national bank like a Wells Fargo or a Chase, and of course this is US based because we're talking about Florida, but there's a location in Florida for one of those national banks, right? And you want to accept it. Interesting. Like this doesn't normally come up when you're talking about different locations for payments. Um, oh, here we go. How can we stop the barking dogs? Let's go and look at that for a second. Oh, this was, goodness, this is 3 days ago. I'm recording this on May 26th, 2025. This was 3 days ago. Constant dog barking may be a legal nuisance. Try talking to your neighbor, then the HOA, then the city. Our next door neighbor gets her 3 dogs live in the fenced backyard, and then they bark constantly, even to the Nate. They're good neighbors. Other than that, we need to try to sleep. Okay, well, quiet enjoyment, quiet enjoyment. If you want to read that, go to floridarealtors.org, search for barking dogs. That's how I just did it. All right, we're going to go to the next one. Aboutfloridalaw.com had a article, because I just had said, you know, Florida tenancy law, and all these things come up. And so this is the last update was in 2021. So this one might be a bit outdated, but this was talking about, this is actually, it looks like a law firm. It is a law firm about Florida law. So this must be a newsletter for a Florida law firm that is, oh, they're not accepting landlord tenant cases except security deposit disputes. So they're not doing tenancy disputes. So this has got some more information on here about how to actually work with your tenant, about security deposit, tenant right to proper written notice from landlord. Yeah, so it actually gives you some verbiage. That's why I include this, because it actually gave you some words, which it says is included in the Florida statute, provides the following paragraph that has to be written in a notice of unpaid rent. So it actually gives you some templates, some sample wording. Tenant right to proper service any lawsuit by the landlord, 5-day and 20-day summons. So there's a couple different options there. Okay, so this is from 2021. It may be outdated, but you know, take it with a grain of salt. I would absolutely research a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to sort of go through my standard list and see what was there and what wasn't there. So we talked about a tenant application fee. There were some fees that were allowed, that if you were allowed, here it is. Landlord has the discretion to collect deposits. Um, Didn't talk about tenant application fees. Grace period for late rent without penalty. I didn't see anything about late rents. Interesting. Or the late fee amount. You know what? Let's go back in here. Late fees. I don't see anything about late payments. Okay, well, if I was going to ask legal aid, that would be one question I would have for legal aid is how much is a reasonable late fee? And they'll either say a dollar amount, like a flat fee dollar amount, or it'll be a percentage amount of the rent. And then they'll give you a day. They'll say it's either due the day you can start charging the late fee the day after the rent is due, or it'll be some amount of days after it's due. But I don't see it. Interesting. Okay. Security deposit. We talked about that's got to be in a Florida banking institution. Got to be protected. Pre-made forms. Didn't see any. Lease wording and details. They noted that the lease could be either oral or written, and if it's written, you've got to have the location, contact information. Didn't see anything about animals at all. No pets or animals. No pet deposit or pet rent. Delivery of signed lease required. No, didn't see that either. Condition inspection at move-in. Not a condition inspection. They're just talking about note the damage and take a picture of it, which I would not recommend. I would do written walkthrough the landlord and the tenant, but that's how I do it to avoid problems. Standard warning letters or wording. There is some wording, but I don't see any pre-made warning letters. No maintenance required inspections. Rent increase, there is some notice of rent increases, but it doesn't say how often or how much. No issue, no mention of renter's insurance. Fixed lease, there is an abrupt ending to fixed leases, so you will have a holdover situation if you do not renew. Condition inspection at move out, no, they're still saying if you're going to make a claim on the security deposit that you're just kind of using your word unless you do a condition inspection. Return of deposit, yes, we talked about that. Use of deposit, yes, but you have to apply to do that to make a deduction. Landlord retaliation defined, yes, and there is no mention of timing, which means there is no timing. And if you've got a dispute, you go right to court. Let's see, abandoned items in Florida. We didn't see anything about abandoned items. What you gotta do. Okay, I'm gonna screen share again because I don't normally do this. I normally have this all. I'm gonna screen share one more time and you're gonna watch me do this because this is literally how I prepare for these podcasts. So I'm just gonna do this. Florida, whoop, abandoned property. No, I'm gonna say personal property. Okay, let's see what comes up. So here we go. Definition of it under Florida law. So it says abandoned personal property is governed by specific statutes that outline the responsibilities of property owners, landlords, law enforcement regarding unclaimed items. Definition of abandoned property refers to tangible personal property left behind by its owner who shows no intention of returning to claim it. This can be a variety of items such as vehicles, boats, furniture, personal belongings. Legal framework is found in chapter 705 of the Florida statutes. So here we go, the responsibility of landlords. When tenants leave personal property behind after the expiration or termination of a tenancy, landlords must follow specific procedures to avoid liability. Key steps. Notification. You've got to do this in good faith, and this is anywhere. Landlords must try their best to notify the tenant or anybody else regarding the tenant, anybody else they believe to be the owner of the property. This notice should describe the items left behind and inform the owner how the property will be disposed of if not claimed. Storage. The landlord must store the abandoned property safely and exercise reasonable care in its storage. And there's a claim period. If the property is valued at over $500, the landlord may sell it at a public sale if the owner does not claim it within a specified time frame, but it doesn't say what the specified time frame is. Landlords must adhere to the procedures outlined in Florida statutes chapter 715 to legally dispose of abandoned property, which includes sending written notice to the tenant's last known address. Okay. So yeah, so there's a lot of law firms understanding abandonment law. There's all these law firms pop up. So I try not to go like legalclarity.org. I try not to go into some of these. I try to just go straight to the source documents. So like the Florida tenancy documents. So here's another law firm, and here we go, Florida Attorney General, myfloridalegal.com. Let's click on that one. myfloridalegal.com. This is the Florida Office of Attorney General. Okay, so I could This one I'll agree with. This one will make sense. So let's see. Issue June of 1976. Okay, this is probably not going to be. Oh, that's used in evidence of a trial. Okay, that's not going to help us. No. Okay. Florida Senate. Okay, this one, let's see. Here we go. Real and personal. Here we go. Bingo. This is what we were looking for. So this is the Florida Senate. This is flsenate.gov. And in fact, I will put this link here right now into the description because I didn't have this one in the abandoned items in the description of this podcast. That's why I didn't have it in here. Okay, loss of abandoned property, reporting procedure for abandoned property, Title II regarding unclaimed evidence, disposal, Title II loss, procedure of loss and abandoned property. I'm just going to click on this. Okay, so it's saying, all right, direct vessel. Okay, oh, this is abandoned boats. Okay. Let's go over here to the right. There is a list here. Statute search tips. Okay, I'm just gonna go landlord. Nothing. Oh, here we go. Landlord should be, okay, here we go. 83. Landlord should pay tenant interest on the security deposit. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Landlord shall pay the tenant interest on the security deposit. Oh, in it or in advance rent. Okay. Let's see. Landlord abandoned property. Let's just do that. Tenant's personal property. Here we go. We're still in Florida Senate, FL Senate. This one is, okay, now we've already done this one. Abandoned, okay, so this is talking about abandonment of the unit. So okay, yeah, so this is tough. I'm not seeing, it's not obvious on how it is. This is the first first location I've come across where it's not obvious on what to do with abandoned property. Let me just put tenant abandoned property in here. We'll do one more and then we'll call it good. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Okay. Prohibiting, yep, this is it. Laundry, so then no, this isn't it either. Okay, this shouldn't be that hard. I'm gonna stop sharing. Come on. Okay. Look, if you've got an abandoned unit situation in Florida, it's not obvious. I would pick up the phone. Let's talk about how you can get some help in Florida. So let's just talk about these different ones. You can go to floridabar.org and get a Florida bar lawyer referral service because this is not inherently obvious about this. One other. You can also just pick up the phone and you can call the consumer services department, which absolutely I would do that. In fact, you can even chat with them. That's kind of cool. So Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, you can call them. Their phone number is 1-800-HELP-FLA or 1-800-435-7352. You can send them a message, which is, no, it doesn't have the email, or you can chat. So if you go to their consumer resources, fdacs.gov, you can live chat with them and just throw it in there and say, how come I have an abandoned tenant property? What do I do? And they will at least get you in the right direction. That's super frustrating. Contact us. Let me just take a look. Oh, if you want to prefer to chat, you can chat. You've got to fill in all of your information, but it looks like that you can request a live chat. So you can get somebody immediately. That's pretty cool. Okay, so, but there you go. So that's your Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Okay, I wish Florida was a little more user-friendly. I think there's a lot of frustration in Florida about housing and tenancy. Some things they do right, but some things are just really confusing, and you've got to ask for help, and you very likely might need to hire a lawyer. So again, Florida Bar Lawyer Referral Service, floridabar.org. I would highly recommend that you get your own legal advice on this one, especially if you've got anything that we didn't discuss. So anyway, let's wrap it up here. Each of my location-specific podcasts is set up the exact same way, answering the same 4 questions. What are the basics of the landlord and housing tenancy laws in that location? What are the nuances in that location? What are some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant in that location if we can find it? And 4, where to get help in your local real estate or province. Get you started there. This is the same format for every location specific podcast. So if you're interested in another geographic area, you already know the framework I'm going to do. Again, one more time, a disclaimer, this episode is not all inclusive. You must do your own research in your specific area for your location, for your rentals. But today's episode will at least get you started. If you're listening to this podcast or you're watching this on YouTube at My Life as a Landlord, chances are that you are either new to real estate or you are new to real estate in Florida. Things you can do to help yourself are go through all of these resources and learn as much as you possibly can. Read the Florida Residential Landlord Tenant Act and try to get in the same room, whether either in person or on social media virtually, with other Florida landlords. There are social media groups that are either national, there may be Florida-based ones that are either on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can ask questions, you can learn, becoming a part of that group, whatever it might be, even if it's a national one, you are going to learn a lot of information, even in general landlording, which may have led you to here. So make sure that you are in the same room asking questions with other like-minded individuals. And it helps if they're in the same location, but they don't always have to be. Remember, you might have to hire a lawyer if you've got something specific going on. If you learned something from today's show, could you pretty please give me a review on whatever podcast platform you got this episode from? Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube, or maybe you listen to this at the website mylifeasalandlord.com. It doesn't matter which platform you listen to, but a review really helps. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed today's show all about Florida. Today, I'm actually recording this episode in Orlando, Florida. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me in the next episode live right now in the library, episode 150 about the U.S. territory of Guam. I'll see you there.